Okay, everybody, welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. This is the sixth chapter, and this is the story of Narada Muni. He's having a conversation with Vyasadeva, and we're going to discuss that fully in just a moment. But for now, I am going to offer my respects to my spiritual master. You're welcome to join me. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna
Krishna Prishta Bhutale
Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschat Yadesha Tarane. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Brahmanityananda Sri Advaita Giridhara Shivasri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So as usual, start with a little kirtan tonight. Now this is a new melody, so go ahead and mute out, but practice this with me a little bit. This is kind of an original melody, actually. It just came to me not too long ago. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama
Where's Jonathan?
Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Govinda, Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana, Hari Govinda, Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana, Hari Govinda, Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana, Hari Govinda, Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana, Hari Govinda Jaya. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora, Hari Bol, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you for this 6th installment. You all look very beautiful. Good to have you with us tonight. So if you'll repeat after me, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Okay, everybody. So I hope everyone is well and in good spirits. All right, so we're going to begin the reading. This is a short chapter, but if you don't mind, I'd like to start back on the 5th chapter and just kind of catch everybody back up. So if you might remember, Vyasadeva was lamenting that he had left something out of his writings. So just about the time he was lamenting, Narada Muni shows up, right? Because this is what Narada does. So he asked him, he says, can you please tell me what is the cause of my disturbance? I've done everything properly according to, to the rules and the regulations. He's lived up to all the standards. He brought the Vedas into 4 sections so that it'd be easier for people to understand. He wrote the Mahabharata, so that friends of the twice born and laborers and just regular common folk could understand. But he was still dissatisfied. So Narada asked him a question. He said, are you satisfied with describing the process of self-realization that related to the mind and the body? Right? So if you say the process of self-realization is not really involving the mind and the body, is it? It involves the spiritual self inside, the soul. So the process of self-realization is to realize that you're not the body or the mind, but that instead you are the immortal soul. So there he corrected Vyasadeva. And of course, this is a pastime of God, you have to understand, but it's for our benefit, so that he was corrected. So he told him that unless he writes about the sublime activities, the name, the fame, the form, the pastimes, the entourage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which evoke loving devotion, that they're only what he's doing is a place for crows. It's a place of pilgrimage for crows. Because once again, even if you go to the highest planet, Brahmaloka, or down to the lowest, Patalaloka, all are places of death and misery, where repeated birth and death take place. So he says to him, he said, well, then explain who you are. Explain how you got in this situation. He asked him these questions. So if we go back to chapter 5, on text 23, he tells Vyasadeva, Narada speaks, he says, O Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of Brahmins who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. So he goes on to say that only once, by their permission, he took the remnants of their food, the prasadam, which had been offered to God, sanctified food, and by so doing, all of his sins were at once eradicated. So Narada Muni was cleansed of all sinful reaction at this time. Thus being engaged, he became purified in heart. And at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to him. He started thinking, wow, this is pretty good. In other words, he got electrified by the association of these great Vedantists. So he says, oh, Vyasadeva, in that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, he could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. They stayed there for 4 months during Chaturmasi, the rainy season. And they're constantly reciting the Vedantas and the pastimes of the Lord in every moment relishably. He hears them, and thus listening attentively, his taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. So this is what we want for ourselves. There's an old axiom, Chanakya Pandit said, get ghee. In other words, ghee is finer brain substance. It creates tissues like the creates like spinal fluid, brain fluid. It's got all these wonderful nutrients and substance so that we can develop our finer brain, our finer understanding. So he says, by all means, get ghee. Well, in this case, by all means, get Krishna. Whatever it takes to become attracted to Krishna, you need to do that immediately. You don't need to wait another moment. Death is certain. Death is lurking behind every corner. No one knows when death will come for them. It could be this very moment. So we have this moment, and that's all we have. So what do we do with this moment? We discuss the transcendental and sublime pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is glorified by selective poetry in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's a very, very beautiful explanation here that his taste for hearing about the personality of Godhead, just like we're doing, increased at every step. So he goes on to say, as soon as he got that taste, his attention to hear about the Lord became unflinching. He could realize that it was only by his ignorance that he accepted these gross and subtle coverings, which is the gross body and of earth, water, fire, air, and then the subtle body, ether, mind, intelligence, ego, right? That he had accepted those subtle coverings out of ignorance. Just like we've accepted these coverings as ignorance. We believe this is us. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnana Salakaya. You know, the spiritual master comes to teach you that, first of all, you're not the body. You're not the mind. You're not the subtle coverings. You've accepted them, and now you identify them with them, and therefore you're guaranteed new bodies repeatedly to fulfill whatever desires you have that are created by your own mental concoction. Someone is thinking that drinking liquor is pleasurable. We all know that if you don't drink liquor and you drink liquor, you're going to vomit, okay? It's not pleasurable. It's called intoxication. It's toxic. But you can trick yourself to believe that it's good. You can trick yourself to believe you can't live without it. You can trick yourself to believe that you can't be happy without it and that you'll do anything to get it. That's just one example, but you could do it with any item within the entire material universe. Nothing in the material universe can satisfy you because it's temporary in nature and your soul is eternal. So the soul cannot be satisfied unless it's reconnected with that transcendental nature, which is what our Narada has now become attracted to. Okay? So, and he's realized that he's accepted these things out of ignorance. So during this period of time, he heard the great soul sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of Lord Hari. And as the flow of his devotional service began, what happened? What happened? As he began his devotional service, the process begins with those lower modes of nature, ignorance and passion, those coverings vanished. Now, if your coverings of the lower modes of nature were to vanish, how would you feel? So the process of this sadhana bhakti is to gradually remove these lower modes of nature and bring you not only just to the mode of goodness, but to the mode of pure goodness. And in that way, you can transfer back to the spiritual world because your body will be identical with that of the Lord. Pure goodness is transcendental. Your activities, when dedicated to God, become transcendental. They're no longer binding. They actually become liberating. The same activities that you had done previously by going to work, getting some money, coming home, taking care of your family and all that stuff, now that you've added Krishna, becomes the actual source of your liberation instead of your bondage. How cool is that? So he says that he became very much attracted to those sages. So you'll notice that most of the devotees of the Lord are very much attracted to other devotees of the Lord, especially the devotees who are excited and relish the taste of these pastimes together. So that's why we come together, is to increase our taste more and more and let those coverings of passion and ignorance vanish. So he was gentle in his behavior. He was not attracted to stuff the boys might be attracted to, like ball or playing some sports or whatever. Instead, he had subjugated his senses. He was strictly following them with his body and his mind. And his sins had become eradicated in their service, and he had developed strong faith in them. Okay, this is what's going to be required of us. So it's nice to watch the life of Narada and see how Narada went about his self-realization, which is an example of how we'll be going about our self-realization as well. He's setting the example. He even came to say to the incarnation of God, Vyasadeva, to expand more and more, please, more vividly explain the pastimes of the Lord, because it's relishable not only by conditioned souls, but even by liberated souls. Even liberated souls are attracted to those pastimes. So the pastimes, the name, the form, the entourage, the activities of the Lord, those are not mundane. That's not part of a yoga system that you leave behind. You may leave Ashtanga behind. You may leave Jnana behind. You may leave Sankhya behind. Okay? But you're not going to leave Bhakti Yoga behind. Bhakti Yoga means the activity of loving devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, period. There it is. So you don't ever leave that. That is not only the means of conquest, it is the goal of conquest. It is the purpose of the conquest. And what we're reading about here will attract our minds more and more. So he says that as they were leaving, those Bhaktivedantas, who were very kind to the poor-hearted souls, instructed Narada in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself. And where do we find Godhead's instructions? Okay, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Where do we see that? On every verse, Bhagavad Gita. And throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can hear what Krishna is saying to Arjuna, to the devotees, to all of his associates, etc., and so on. So that's the instruction that Narada got, which is most confidential, actually. And by that confidential knowledge, he could understand clearly the influences of the energy of Lord Krishna, the creator, maintainer, annihilator of everything. And by knowing that, one can return to Godhead, to the Supreme Personality Godhead, and meet him in person. Now, guys, this is powerful stuff. I don't know how it's going to get much more powerful. So you're going to have to relish what we're saying here, because you can go back and be again with Krishna in person. As a matter of fact, Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam ivam yo veti tatmadaha chatva deham panarjanma naiti mam eti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and my activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains to my supreme abode, O Arjuna. Krishna says it everywhere. He's saying it here. He's saying it there. Narada's confirming all these things. So he goes on and he goes that thus, when all of a person's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which cause his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work. Now we read that also, what was it, third chapter, Jagarta Karmanon Yacha Loko Yam Karma Bandada Tadarta Karma Kontiya Mukta Sangha Samachara. Work has to be done for Krishna. It's not a question that it could be done or should be done. If you don't work for Krishna, you're working for yourself. If you work for yourself, then whatever your good and bad reactions come, that's you. That's your business. When disease comes, that's your problem. That's your business. These things are created by you. When the next body comes, The next family comes, the next nation comes, the next society comes, the next old age and disease and death come. That is created by you. Because Krishna is telling us here how to get out of it once and for all. And Narada is going to demonstrate exactly how he got out of it in just a moment. So, when a person performs duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, one constantly remembers Sri Krishna and remembers his names, his forms, his qualities, his activities, his adventures, and one becomes in love with God. His activities are so perfect. They astonish us. They blow our minds. They do. It's not hard to fall in love with God, but you must know God to do it. And where can you find the personal name, the personal information, the personal activities of his incarnations? You find that in Srimad Bhagavatam. So let us all chant the glories of Vasudeva, along with all of his expansions, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Sankarshan, right? So it goes on, it says, please therefore describe. He asked him, go ahead and describe the Almighty's Lord's activities, which will satisfy the hankerings of all great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of the common people who are always suffering from the material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such misery. So I just wanted to take 5 minutes there. Hopefully that was about 5. And kind of set you up for this chapter in case you're just joining us for the very first time and you didn't go back to the first installment. Okay? You can do that by going to Bhakti Yoga Tennessee, I believe. Is that correct? Bhakti Yoga Tennessee or Gayatri Dasa on YouTube. And please go there. We have to drive traffic, obviously, to those places. So tell your friends to come and hear all these wonderful stories. So this is chapter 6, and I'll begin reading. So Sutta said, O Brahmanas, thus hearing about Sri Narada's birth and activities, Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God and the son of Satyavati, inquired as follows. Sri Vyasadeva said, what did you, Narada, do after the departure of the great sages who had instructed you in scientific transcendental knowledge before the beginning of your present birth? O son of a Brahmana, how did you pass your life after your initiation? How did you attain this body, having quit your old one in due course of time? O great sage, time annihilates everything in due course. So how is it that this subject matter, which happened prior to this day of Brahma, how is it still fresh in your memory, undisturbed by time? I'm drinking this tea that we got given to us at the last Veggie Fest. And it's got all kind of sticks and flowers in it. And so I'm choking on these flowers. It's delicious tea, though. All right, so Narada said, the great sages who imparted scientific knowledge of the transcendence to me departed for other places, and I had to pass my life in this way. I was the only son of my mother, who was not only a simple woman, but a maidservant as well. Since I was her only offspring, she had no other alternative for protection. She bound me with the ties of affection. She wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for me. The world is under the full control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of a puppet master. When I was a mere child of 5 years, I lived in a Brahmana school. I was dependent on my mother's affection and had no experience of different lands. Once upon a time, and we find this theme throughout the Bhagavatam, once upon a time. Because this is during a period of time, maybe in a previous yuga, another millennium, but these stories are being reenacted all throughout all the universes. These stories are actually eternal, and they're meant for everyone's benefit and for everyone's ultimate liberation and good. Once upon a time, my poor mother, when going out one night to milk a cow, was bitten on the leg by a serpent, influenced by supreme time. I took this as the special mercy of the Lord, who always desires benediction for his devotees, And so thinking, I started for the north. After my departure, I passed through many flourishing metropolises, towns, villages, animal farms, mines, agricultural lands, valleys, flower gardens, nursery gardens, and natural forest. I passed through hills and mountains full of reservoirs of various minerals like gold, silver, and copper, and through tracts of land with reservoirs of water filled with beautiful lotus flowers, fit for the denizens of heaven, decorated with bewildered bees and singing birds. I then passed alone through many forests of rushes, bamboos, reeds, sharp grasses, weeds, and caves, which were very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark, and dangerously fearful forests, which were the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals. Thus traveling, I felt tired, both bodily and mentally, and I was both thirsty and hungry. So I took a bath in a river lake and also drank water. By contacting water, I got relief from my exhaustion. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the supersoul situated within, using my intelligence as I had learned from liberated souls. As soon as I began to meditate upon the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead within my mind transformed in transcendental love. Tears rolled down my eyes, and without delay, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of my heart. Now, I just want to stop here for 1 second and just make an observation. Prabhupada said, that in conversations that you can, by chanting once only, sincerely, you can receive the benediction of the mercy of Krishna, right? So, obviously, Narada is son of Brahma, so it's a little different. But in our situation also, when we sit down to meditate, we don't meditate on the void. We don't meditate on a candle. We meditate either on the sound of God's name or the form of God in our mind and heart, which is described in places throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam that the Lord is a threefold bending form. He's playing a flute. He's wearing yellow garments. He's wearing the Kastuba gem. He's wearing, he's got peacock feather in his hair. He's bluish in color. So he's all of these things are there. And so when we understand who Krishna is, what he's looking like, the mark of Srivats, all of these different shark earrings, all of these things, all the descriptions are there. And so when we meditate on God, we start at the feet. We don't start at the face. We start at the feet. Just like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we start on the first canto. We don't jump to the 10th. We go through the first 9 cantos. That way we understand all the science of Godhead. It is a great science. A science means that you can experiment with it and get direct proof from your experiment, right? They call it science when these scientists speculate about the universe, but they've admitted that we don't even see 5% of the known universe. We don't even see 5% of it. So how can they even postulate a theory or whatever? They're just groping in the dark and we're listening to them. We're buying that bad medicine, y'all. That's not good medicine. That's not the same information that we're receiving from the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So our goal is to hear from the authoritative sources, right? Instead of from these bogus so-called scientists who have an extension of their eyes that is a telescope, but the eyes themselves are imperfect. So that's why Arjuna received transcendental eyes. And Krishna has to say that to others throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam so that we can understand God. But when you do understand God and you meditate on God sincerely, you also may become transformed in transcendental love. And so here it says, the tears rolled down his eyes, and without delay, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of his heart. O Vyasadeva, at that time being exceedingly overpowered by feelings of happiness, every part of his body became separately enlivened. Being absorbed in an ocean of ecstasy, I could not see both myself and the Lord. The transcendental form of the Lord, as it is, satisfies the mind's desire and at once erases all mental incongruencies. Upon losing that form, I suddenly got up, being perturbed, as is usual when one loses that which is most desirable. I desired to see again that transcendental form of the Lord, but despite my attempts to concentrate upon him with eagerness to view the form again, I could not see him anymore, and thus dissatisfied, I was very much aggrieved. Seeing my attempts in that lonely place, the personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all mundane description, spoke to me with gravity and pleasing words, just to mitigate my grief. O Narada, the Lord spoke, I regret that during this lifetime you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely free from all material taints can hardly see me. O virtuous one, you have only once seen my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me, because the more you hanker for me, the more you will be freed from all material desires. So Prabhupada says in the purport of this particular verse, material service has a satisfaction point, but spiritual service does not. Spiritual loving service does not have a satisfaction point. The ecstasy is ever increasing. The newness, the freshness is ever increasing at every step that we take. So hankering for something that can never bring you happiness, like we do in the mode of passion, is not what we're talking about here. Krishna's talking about hankering for his form, hankering for understanding who he is, his association, his relationship, one of 5 various rasas that we can develop. So by the service of the absolute truth, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. Consequently, he goes on to become my associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material worlds. And we just read that verse from Bhagavad Gita where he said that was the fact as well. Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time, even at the time of creation, as well as the time of annihilation. Your remembrance will continue by my mercy. So Krishna says, and whoever at the time of death quits his body, thinking of me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Antakale chamame vya smaran mukva kalevaram. So Krishna explains that whatever you've been thinking about also in this life, and you put your heart and soul into, wherever your heart is, there your wallet will be also. Right? Wherever your heart is, there your mind will be also. So you have to put your heart with the Lord and not with the material world, because the material senses will never satisfy you and never bring you the happiness you're looking for. So by firm faith in the Lord, by engaging all your intelligence in the Lord, then you're going on to become an associate of the Lord in the transcendental world after giving up these deplorable worlds. So, Tesham Satata Yuktanam, Bhajatam Priti Purvakam, Dadami Buddhi Yogantam Jainamam Upayanti Te. To those who are constantly devoted, Krishna says, constantly devoted to me, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. That is Bhagavad Gita 10:10, right? So intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time, even at the time of creation, as well as the time of annihilation. Your remembrance will continue by Krishna's mercy. Then that supreme authority, personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offered my obeisances unto him, bowing my head. Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are benedictory. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious. So when we have a realization that God is everything and God is all of those things, then we make a choice. We make a choice. You know, what is it? Sarvadharma Parityajya Mamikam Saranambraja. You know, I am the source of all the material and all the spiritual worlds. One who knows this perfectly well worships me with all their heart. Where else is there to go? This is the final step, back home, back to Godhead, is to fall back in love with the most beloved, the most dear, the most to your heart, and to everyone's. So when Narada realized this, he said, thus I began chanting the holy name. He began chanting the fame of the Lord by repeated recitation. There are plenty of places throughout the Bhagavatam that say, by hearing this in the morning or in the evening, these stories of the incarnations of God, or by hearing particular stories of the Vedas, one becomes sinless, one becomes attracted to the Lord, and at the end of life, one is transferred back to the spiritual world. Why wouldn't we want to do that? What is it we're staying here for? What is it we're staying here for? More disease? Can't wait to get more disease, more death? You want to lose everything you got? Is that what you're doing? Because you got on a train, it's the long black train, y'all, right? And we know where it drops us off at the station. So you got to be ready to depart the train and be in the presence of God. And so, O Brahmana Vyasadeva, in due course of time, I, who was fully absorbed in thinking of Krishna, and who therefore had no attachments, being completely freed from all material taints, met with death, as lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. So, in a moment, bang, your whole life passes before your eyes, right? We've heard that our whole lives. So what will you be thinking about? What was your life made of? What were the moments of your life? What do they consist of? Are you remembering Krishna at every moment? Are you chanting about the Lord at every moment, remembering the pastimes of the Lord, dedicating everything you have back to the Lord? Are you doing that at every moment? That's the idea. We want to get to that point. And then we'll actually experience this ecstasy that we're talking about, that Narada's talking about, and the tears will flow. When that happens, your attraction will intensify to the preliminary stage of love of God called bhava. And from that stage, gradually over time, you can develop prema bhakti, pure, unalloyed, loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Krishna says, bhaktya chwananyaya sakya, aham evam vidorjuna, gyantum drastum chitatvena, parestum chad parantapa. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So we know Krishna is saying that. So that's 1154 in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is saying these things, and now Narada is confirming them. So having been awarded, now after his death, he was awarded a transcendental body befitting the associate of the personality of Godhead. He said, I quit the body made of 5 material elements, and thus all acquired fruitive results of work, karma, stopped. At the end of the millennium, when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him along with all the creative elements, and I also entered through his breathing. Now, guys, this is not so fantastic, right? From your breath right now, coming out of your mouth or nostrils or whatever, are trillions of molecules. They're all little tiny universes, aren't they? They have a nucleus, they've got electrons, they've got protons, they're spinning around, going at different vibrations, creating the various material elements. So the Lord, through his breathing and through the perspiration from his pores, these universes are manifesting. And they're also being taken back into the Lord's body at the time of annihilation. So then, check this out. After 4,300,000,000 solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, because Brahma took a nap too. Brahma's tired. He's in the mode of passion. He's creating. He's got to be tired. So he took a nap for 4,300,000,000 years. We can't get our head around these timetables. I mean, in some persuasions of religion in the world, they think the whole world is only 6,000 years old. So try to understand, Brahma took a nap for 4,300,000,000 years, and when he got up, by the will of the Lord, all of the saints and rishis like Marichi, Angira, Atri, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord, and Narada also appeared along with them. So he came out after the annihilation. Since then, by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, I travel everywhere without restriction, both in the transcendental world and in the three divisions of the material world. This is because I've fixed an unbroken devotional service to the Lord. So he had entered into the mysteries of the Lord's understanding, right? And so that's how that happened. Okay? And thus he says, I travel. Constantly singing the transcendental message of the glories of the Lord, vibrating this instrument called a veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which was given to me by Lord Krishna. Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart as if called for as soon as I began to chant his holy activities. Prabhupada says that when we call on God's name, God comes and dances on our tongue. Right? So here, Narada is saying he at once he calls on him, he appears on the lotus of his heart. The Lord wants his relationship back with you. He wants it back. We just have to want it back like he does. That's all. That's what this bhakti process is, right? We want to give back to the Lord all that he has given to us. So it is personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxieties due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects can cross the ocean of nescience on a most suitable boat, the constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. It is true by practicing a strain of the senses by the yoga system, one can get relief from the disturbances of desire and lust. But this is not sufficient to give satisfaction to the soul. For this satisfaction is derived from devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yes, you may see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. You may do all of that, but you're not going to be satisfied. You may have an impersonal experience of the Brahman realization of God and light of God's body. But because you're prone to activities, you can't be inactive even for a moment, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So what are we doing? We're not giving up desires. We're adding hankerings. We're adding unlimited desires to serve the Supreme Personality. There's the answer. There's the higher taste. That's when you become addicted to this devotional service, and your life becomes centered around Krishna rather than Maya or the illusion, right? So he says to Vyasadeva, he says, you are freed from all sins. Thus I've explained my birth and activities for self-realization as you have asked. All this will be conducive for your personal satisfaction also. So, Sutta Goswami said, thus addressing Vyasadeva, Srila Narada Muni took his leave of him, and vibrating on his veena instrument, he left to wander at his free will. All glory and success to Srila Narada Muni, because he glorifies the activities of the personality of Godhead And so doing, he himself takes pleasure and also enlivens all the distressed souls of the universe. So there's a story, a once upon a time story for you. Okay? And I think that this should enliven everyone because it shows a historical personality who became self-realized through meditation on the Lord and through the association of the Vaishnavas. Okay? So if you go back to, and I'm going to open the floor for conversation, but if you go back to, let's see, this is, which one is this one? This is 26. And you go to the purport of 26, where he says, thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Okay, so I remember when I became a devotee back in the mid 70s, early 70s, we didn't care. We were happy to don monk's robes, to shave our head. We were dancing in the streets. We did not care for external formality because we were tasting ecstasy that was given to us by Srila Prabhupada. His ecstasy, he let us have a little taste of it just so that we could begin our devotional service. So that ecstasy was so powerful, though, that it caused us to just forget about any of the external considerations. We weren't so concerned about those things. So it says in here that such devotees have no desire for material gain. They are conducted by one single desire. They want to go back home, back to Godhead. This awaits them in due course on quitting the material body because they have the highest aim of life. By going back to Godhead, they are never envious of anyone here. No one here has anything a devotee wants. What do you want from someone? What have they got? It's all nothing but chewing the chewed in the material world. You've tried all these things for millions of births and lives, and here you are still trying, and you're not satisfied. So you develop this singular desire. They have the highest aim. They're never envious of anyone, nor they are proud of being eligible to go back to Godhead. Their only business is to chant and remember the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord, and according to their personal capacity, distribute the message for others' welfare without motive of material gain. So that is everything this chapter has to offer in a nutshell. And if there's any questions, please go ahead and ask. Or if there's any comment. Excuse me.
Do we know what age Narada Muni was when his mother passed away?
He was 5 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, remember he left for the forest. He was a mere boy of 5 years old.
Just like Dhruva Maharaj. He was
Right.
5, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when his mother passed, he accepted as God's will, and he headed for the north, which is where all the sages go. Great kings in the Vedic culture would, at the end of their life, when they knew that their body was becoming useless, would literally strip themselves of their royal attire, their crowns, their jewels, all of their accoutrements, their clothing, their, robes and arraignments, stand naked and walk to the forest without looking back, not considering their great treasuries, not considering their vast lands, their armies, not considering all of their wives or whatever they may have had in this world. They went to meditate on one thing, and that's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just like Narada Muni has done. This was the way things have been done for hundreds of thousands of years, millennium and yugas and on throughout all history, right? So in this age, Our age is Cheto Darpana Marjanam Baba Mahadevagni Ravapram Shreya Karavya Chandrika Vitaranam Vidya Jivanam. Our whole thing is this Sankirtan movement. Our whole thing is this congregational chanting of the holy names of God. And by doing that, we are delivered. We are remembering God at every moment by doing that. So this singing and remembering of these names, fames, forms, and pastimes of the Lord is the key to our overall success. So this chapter lended itself to this way of presenting, and some of the other chapters we'll read together. Some maybe we can even do in a dramatic reading. But this Srimad Bhagavatam is amazing, and everybody who is here, I want to thank you for being with us tonight and hearing this wonderful story of Narada Muni, who God himself personally came to through his meditation and his sincerity. And then Narada was given a transcendental body with all of the opulences. By the way, there are 8 mystic opulences that Narada Muni has, and he was given those opulences. You can read about those in Srimad Bhagavatam. They're never misused. They're only used for the sake of the Lord. But they potentially exist within the heart of the devotee. And if the devotee calls on one of those mystic opulences, he can do that. Just like you see Narada Muni is traveling anywhere in the universe from the highest to lowest planetary system and back to the transcendental world. That is one of the mystic opulences. So, a lot of stuff in this chapter. We could spend a few days discussing it, but just try to understand that this is one great story. The next chapter is the punishment of Drona, right? Is that what it is? You looking at it, Rangavati? Let's look. So the next chapter,
Drona, yes.
Yeah. So we got another chapter coming up, and let's see here. Yep, and we'll be doing that next Monday. The son of Drona punished. This is a great chapter. This is really kind of, in a way, the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because it talks about Maharaj Pariksit also later in the chapter. There's quite a bit in this chapter, so we'll want as many readers as we can get to come. You might want to read through this and practice some of the words. There are a few of the words, Ashvatthama, Duryodhana. I mean, there's a few names and words you may want to practice if you'd like to read with us. But is there any other comment? We're at 8 o'clock. Time flies when you're having fun, y'all. It's a great story. So, and it's now recorded for posterity. So please share this story with anybody. If there's no further questions, I think what I will do, with your permission, is I'll go ahead and end this call tonight. All right? And we'll see you next Monday night for another reading. And please be here next week ready to read, because there's going to be a lot of verses that we're going to have to get through. Okay?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Thanks for coming. Haribol.